And it is the Saturday Coffee Klatch with Heather Lofthouse.
Hello.
And yours truly, Robert Reich. Heather, what are we going to talk about today?
Well, the big ugly bill that just passed, weight, and all the implications of it.
I think this is just absolutely not just awful. This is a disgrace, an utter disgrace. The fact that we have this bill coming at us, the American people are going to have to struggle under the consequences of this bill. And let's be clear what the consequences are.
Yes,
We've talked
please.
about this a little bit in the past. Oh, I miss Central Park.
Already?
I do. I'm just sitting here thinking, it was last week we were sitting on a park bench.
It was pretty blissful.
Beautiful. Mamdani had just been, basically almost elected.
I know, we had the birds and that squirrel.
And here we are back in America. It feels like we're in California, but it feels like we're under siege. And this bill is sort of an indication of the siege that we are all under. It takes at least $1 trillion out of Medicaid. It takes a big chunk out of food stamps, a big chunk out of nutrition assistance. And what does it do? It gives the richest people in America a huge tax cut, another huge tax cut, as if the richest needed another huge tax cut. I mean, we've talked about on this program that we're at near record levels of inequality in terms of income and wealth in this country already. And I want to get into this with you because another feature of this bill is that it puts huge funding, huge resources into anti-immigrant surveillance and detention, potentially turning America into an anti-immigrant police state.
But how much money are we talking? I mean, I don't think the news has been covering the scale of what we're talking.
It hasn't, Heather. I mean, first of all, people don't understand the scale of this money anyway. I mean, adding, and I forgot to mention, over $3 trillion to the national debt, in addition to everything else, it's probably the antithesis, this bill, of good government or where this country ought to be heading.
How about limited government?
It's not limited in any way. In fact, it's the antithesis of what Republicans have been talking about for years. But your point about the scale, I think it's very hard for most people to understand what $1 trillion or what $2 trillion or what adding $3 trillion to the national debt actually amounts to. Let's start with the national debt. Do you mind?
Oh, this is what I've been waiting for. Oh, let me get my coffee. Go.
Well, look, you add $3.3 trillion to the national debt. We don't have the exact figure, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. And you have a debt that is significantly higher than the total yearly national product of the United States. And the problem, ultimately, with that degree of debt is that you are causing global bondholders of the United States to get nervous. They're charging more to lend money to the United States. And a lot of these people are Americans. They're very rich Americans, mostly. They are also lending money to the United States to cover this debt. And that means interest rates, particularly long-term interest rates, go up. That means people have to pay more for mortgages and auto loans. It's a hidden price increase, a hidden inflationary increase that all of us have to pay. And meanwhile, the value of the dollar is going down because everybody around the world says to themselves, well, I can't trust the United States to maintain its fiscal integrity.
Right.
Now, that's the least problematic part of this bill. I find, honestly, the notion that we're taking $1 trillion or more out of Medicaid and giving it to rich people effectively. And
reverse Robin Hood, as
it's
you've said
reverse
before.
Robin Hood, but it's reverse Robin Hood in a very particular and a very cruel way. The benefits in terms of the tax benefits happen earlier. They will happen almost immediately. The rich will get even more of a tax benefit than they have already. But the costs in terms of the Medicaid reductions, the 11 point, and we don't know whether it's 11 million or 11.5 million people who would be losing their health care coverage.
Who are those people? Can you just give us a sense?
Well, they are lower income. They are not all poor. I mean, they're lower income, working class. They are overwhelmingly white.
And where are they?
And they are in red states.
On average. Yeah.
Yeah, on average. I mean, there's some obviously in California, New York, many, but you have a lot of them who are going to be suffering in red states that are represented by the same people who voted for this bill. That's one of the great ironies in this bill, and I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of Republicans didn't want to go along with it. You also had the Freedom Caucus. You had the Republicans didn't want to add to the national debt. You had that two groups of Republicans, how they got together finally and made a deal is an interesting. Historians will look at this as not only Trump's power, but his exercise of almost authoritarian. In fact, it's not almost.
I was going to
It's
say.
authoritarian power to threaten these legislators, threaten them with being primaried in the next election. Tom Tillis of North Carolina, he said, "Okay, I'm leaving. I'm just leaving.
Yep,
I'm
he
not
said,
even
"I'll
going to
resign,"
I'm not going
in
to
his
stick around."
60s.
So you have this threat. You also have an implicit threat to many of these legislators that the vigilantes of Trump, the violent, prone Trump followers are going to take it out on some of the legislators that actually don't go along. This is not that far removed, Heather, from what we saw in the 1930s.
No.
Mostly in Germany, but we saw elsewhere in the 1930s. So you have these legislators, Republicans, intimidated, fearful that they're going to be primaried or they may be in some danger. They go along at the 11th hour. And you also have at the same time, and this is what is not getting enough play in the press, you have huge amounts of money going into surveillance,
Bingo.
technology, the so-called wall on the southern border, and detention facilities for migrants. All detention facilities all over the country, like the alligator. What
Alcatraz.
was it called? Alcatraz in the Everglades. That Trump just loves the idea that there are alligators and crocodiles all around these.
But to be clear, the amount that is in this bill for these detention centers and this process of detaining is more than the budget that was USAID's total budget.
Yes, it's more than the entire budget of the federal prison system. It is a huge amount of money going into, again, we're talking about just detention centers, not even mentioning all of the surveillance and the wall and all of the additional maintenance of the southern border.
So what's that aligned with? I mean, is this like a war budget? I mean, this seems...
It is, in a sense, a war budget. I mean, this is the danger here, and let's be very, very clear. The danger here is that we tip over into giving Trump and the Department of Homeland Security and ICE the kind of powers that we reserve during wartime. And you remember some of the terrible things the United States has done during the Second World War, putting Japanese Americans into detention camps. When you have internment camps, detention camps, and they're going to be all over America, and they are large, obviously they're going to be used.
Yep.
When you have ICE becoming an army in and of itself, it's going to be used.
And another analogy, too, or fact, is that detention budget that's in this bill is bigger than NIH, CDC, and cancer research, what was cut for all of them combined.
Yeah, I think this is extremely important because the press has been focusing on, Yes, cuts in Medicaid, very, very important. Cuts in food stamps, terrible.
Devastating, yeah.
And the debt, national debt increasing, and all of the, the problems with regard to giving the rich a huge increase in their tax benefits. That's all true. But this part that we're now talking about, the police state that comes out of this, is, in some senses, the most dangerous and most devastating.
But so you talked about all of these Republicans who are saluting and doing what they're supposed to do, right? They're ignoring their constituents ish, and they are going along with Trump, but they're not cowering in a corner. I mean, you saw this yesterday that they are in line getting signed merch.
You mean from the White House?
Yes, but so
Well,
what is that description of our
I
reality?
think there's several things going on at the same time. The Republican Party is gone. I mean, we've talked about this before, but this is the final piece of evidence. There is no longer a Republican Party. It is a Trump cult. It is a Trump posse. It is basically lining up entirely behind the strongman, the leader.
And it's so sophomoric and it's so materialistic that these people, but also,
Sophomoric, materialistic.
yeah,
I
those are some
think that
words.
you put your finger exactly.
But Bob, to have this man, I mean, it's so infantilizing as well, right? To have this the daddy, the king daddy of the White House, and now they're doing, and then they get in line to get signed merch. What is happening?
Well, yeah, but see, I think the infantilizing is kind of an interesting concept because you've got this man in the White House who wants to create and has spent years creating the illusion of being all powerful and basically extraordinary, potent and somebody that has no weakness whatsoever. And you have one of his techniques is to make others people feel that they are children and that they are kind
Reliant on him.
totally dependent on him. And this is an old fascist technique that we saw this again and again in the 30s. Mussolini and Hitler and Franco and others and Stalin, this is what we
And more
confronted.
recently, Orban and others.
And Viktor Orban is certainly, this is out of his playbook as well. And so Donald Trump has turned the Republican Party into a bunch of infants, essentially, dependent on him, completely dependent on him, and more interested in his approval and getting and avoiding his wrath than they are interested in the approval of their constituents.
What's interesting is the timing on all of this, right? So when do these cuts take place relative to the midterms? It's not all going to happen on Monday morning, right?
Well, this is also important. It happens, the cuts in Medicaid and in food stamps and in nutrition assistance, they happen after the 2026 midterm elections.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yes, it's very convenient because a lot of the people who are going to be hurt the most, who are, as we talked about, Republican constituents, they are not going to wake up to the fact that they are hurt until after they have voted in the midterms.
And there's a difference between knowing you're going to be hurt and feeling the hurt, including as you go to the ballot box.
Well, exactly. And Republicans are going to be saying to them over and over again, look, there was fraud and waste in Medicaid, and putting a work requirement on Medicaid is only fair. People should work for whatever they get. What Republicans will not be saying to their constituents is you are going to lose your health coverage. And the reason you're going to lose your health coverage is because many of you are unable to work, and many of you are unable to do the paperwork that is required to continue to stay on Medicaid, and many of you are dependent on food stamps, and you are not going to get any. Goodbye. There are, my constituents, I know, and you are more vulnerable today. You are living paycheck to paycheck. You may not even be living paycheck to paycheck. The minimum wage has sunk to almost nothing in many states. You are people who voted for Trump because you thought that he was going to bring prices down. He was going to make things affordable for you. He was going to make your life better. And you are actually now facing a life that is worse because you're going to have to pay more for healthcare and for food and for everything else. And we haven't even talked about the Trump tariffs
I know.
and what they're going to do to prices. So Republicans are essentially, and Republican office holders have become zombies in this Trump army. And I haven't really witnessed anything quite as dangerous. You and I have been talking about Trump and about his goings on for many, many years, and we've looked at the first 3 months and the first 100 days. Trump is now flirting with a total dictatorial fascism.
So I want to talk about that and what stage are we in? Because I met someone recently who said we're not on the brink, we're in it, we're in the midst of it. So that's
What's the it?
fascism.
Well, there's no official definition of when
You
we
can't
tip into.
do like this and
we
no.
can't. We can't. But I think we're very close if we're not into it right now, because all of the essentials are there. That is, intimidating the universities, intimidating law firms, going after every media outlet that is in any way criticizing you, going after the courts, arresting even individual judges, making judges fearful for their lives, and then on top of all of this, establishing the mechanisms of a police state.
Right.
The surveillance technologies that are in the bill and are being funded in this new big, awful, bad, horrible bill.
Ugly. Yeah.
And the detention facilities.
So there is no dissent allowed. There is no critical thinking allowed. I mean, it's coming at all of these levels to you just want zombies saluting.
And remember, he was elected not by a majority. I'm talking about
Though
Donald Trump.
I know, but
he was
he
elected
loves to
by
say
a
he was.
plurality, and it was it was 1.5%. This bill gets through the House and the Senate by the smallest. I mean, J.D. Vance had to go to the Senate to cast the deciding vote because it was 50-50. In the House, you have a tiny, tiny, tiny majority.
I know, but he commands as though it's a mandate, and people think it's a mandate.
Exactly. He takes any advantage he can of there being a so-called mandate. He creates the impression, and he's a con man. I mean, we've seen this. We know this. This is not new. But he is taking his con man act to a new level.
And this police state really enables him.
It does, because it enables him to not only keep the pressure on the scapegoats, who are, the putative
Yeah.
hordes of people
Stephen
coming over
Miller
the,
wants 3,000 arrested.
Stephen Miller does want.
Yeah.
That's his goal. He's stated 3,000 a day. He wants arrested, detained,
and eventually deported.
Also, the economy can't take it. I mean, this is, if you're looking at estimates of the number of American workers who are here, who are undocumented, we're talking about 5% of the entire American workforce, Heather. They are also consumers. They are not taking Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security because they're not eligible for Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security. So they're putting money into all of these public programs. They are buying things. Their buying power is very, very important. And employers need them, particularly in the agricultural sector and in the hospitality sector, and they are now vulnerable. The other thing that we have to recognize, Trump was saying it's just going to be criminals who are going to be deported. And some of the Trump followers think it's just criminals. No, the deportations now are anybody who does not have full citizenship. Even green card holders, some of them are being detained. And you have some Americans, some people who are citizens who are being detained because they get caught up in the dragnet. And how are they going to prove what needs to be proved.
And are you worried that number is going to increase?
It's going
the
to
naturalized
increase
citizens?
because it's going to obviously it's going to increase. I mean, when you have an army, an internal army that is designed to root out X, whatever X is, and you have detention facilities already set up, camps. Again, the parallels with Nazi Germany are extraordinary. And yes, I am worried that this gives Trump even more ability to intimidate, frighten, and basically use fear with regard to a lot of this population. And it's Americans. Any American who has brown skin is now likely to be stopped at some point by an immigration official, ICE agent, some sort of ICE police, and asked for his or her papers.
Right, right. Can I ask a question, please? So, Trump voters from last time, right? So here they are. Now I look in some of we test our videos, and you can see some comments where it's, give him a chance. It's not as great as I hoped, but there's still time. This verdict is still out, just don't diss him yet. And I have family members, who are saying, he's not, this is not how I envisioned it, but. And so at what point do people say, I mean, it's hard for any of us to admit mistakes and that we were wrong. But at what point, if these, cutting of SNAP doesn't hit by the time we get to the midterms, at what point is there going to be enough people that say, you know what, I don't actually like what's happening to our society? How do we get to that tipping point?
What is the tipping point? I don't know the answer to that, but what I tell myself in order to cheer myself up
and
is
me
that,
and us, because we're here too.
is that there is going to be a tipping point, because as we slide toward or already in fascism, it forces people to take sides, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the university.
But what are the sides?
University presidents, some of them, like Columbia, took the side of Trump. I mean, so, I will negotiate. You will do whatever you want. Others, like Harvard, at least maintained some integrity. Law firms divided. Some law firms went along with Trump, what Trump was demanding. Some others said no. But imagine all of society as the vice gets tighter and tighter, as the fascist state becomes bolder and bolder. All of us will have to choose sides. All of us will have to be either the Neville Chamberlains of the American, of facing Nazi Germany and capitulating and surrendering, or we will be people like Joseph Welch, the people who stand up to tyranny and said, as Joseph Welch did when he was in the Army McCarthy hearings against Joe McCarthy, he said, have you no decency? We are not going to stand for this. And I think that, I think most Americans really are decent people. Now, Heather, you may disagree with me. You don't disagree with me.
I don't. No, I think most Americans are decent people.
Well, if most Americans are decent people, then as we get deeper and deeper into this fascist state, then more and more people are going to say no.
But this is a serious reckoning to be on this, because we used to talk about left versus right. Remember those good old days?
Yes, those.
Remember those?
I do remember them. This has nothing to do with left versus
No.
right. This has to do with, on the one hand, fascism, and the other hand, democracy. It has to do with either freedom and decency, or it has to do with totalitarianism and cruelty. And who is going to be standing up for totalitarianism and for cruelty and for a lot of the things that Trump and the people around him are imposing on America? I think when it comes to it, Heather, and I really, this is a faith.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
I'm glad you have it.
I think Americans will be standing up in mass and saying
realize
no.
that is the choice, and that it's not just the fun con man who is on TV who wants to make America great again and is willing to stand up to, The elites, allegedly.
Well, there's going to be, there is certainly a group of Americans who are absolutely committed to Donald Trump.
Right.
I was just in Tennessee, and along the roads, Trump signs everywhere, and these are people who I would meet in cafes and all that. They're American
Yeah.
people, lovely people, friendly people, but I think that once people recognize what the stakes are,
Right.
even though the core Trumpers are going to stay there, a lot of Americans are not going to be willing to do that. And I want to go back to Mondani for a minute.
I was going to just do that.
Were you?
That's weird.
That's a
What were
mind
you?
meld.
Okay, I was going to say,
Yeah.
probably not what you were going to say. You saw that Trump said, I will have him arrested if he disagrees with anything we say in terms of ICE. I mean, he's already out of the gate
He's already out of the gate.
because this guy is progressive.
But that's Mondani. What he did is put together a coalition, a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-class coalition. Now, granted, it is New York City, and New York City is not America by any
But
stretch of the
still,
imagination.
did you see all the maps? It was fascinating who voted for him.
Yeah. Well, again, as I try to calm myself about what's happening, I say not only will this force Americans to take a stand, and most people are decent and they will take a stand against this, and they will let their politicians know. And but I also look at the upcoming young politicians like Mamdani
Yeah.
and what they've managed to do.
Right. Can your Substack yesterday about universities was so specific and scary. Can you review a little bit of what's been happening in terms of Penn and
Well, this is
University of Virginia?
again a fascist technique, and you don't have to look very far. I mean, like Viktor Orban in Hungary did it. Once you take over the major parts of government, once you substitute the civil service for your, put your loyalists in, and you put pressure on the courts, and you do all of those things, then you focus on the universities. Because they are potential sources of pushback. That's where you have a lot of people in almost every society that are cosmopolitan, that are thinking about what's happening in the world, that are aware of the dangers of fascism.
And they're unifying universities. They are powerhouses of young people coming together.
Exactly. And this is a threat to totalitarians, to tyrants. And so what happened just recently, the University of Virginia, Trump put pressure on the University of Virginia to get rid of its president, not because of anti-Semitism. This was DEI. This is another
So-called.
kind of bogeyman of Trump's. DEI. Now, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm sorry, I used to think those, in fact, I still do, those are good things, but he has made them into bad things. So University of Virginia was not going fast enough on DEI, and therefore the president is out. Now at Harvard, there is a new civil rights lawsuit, coming from the government against Harvard, on top of everything else that Harvard has been contending with just this week. And you have various universities that are willing to, like the University of Pennsylvania, willing to bow to Trump's demands with regard to transgender athletes. Now, what this has to do, remember, DEI, transgender athletes, anti-Semitism, I mean, these are all pretexts.
Right.
These are all just rationales for taking over the American university systems, or intimidating so many professors and so many others in a university that they don't want to take any chances.
Right.
And that's, again, right out of Viktor Orban's playbook.
I know it. So when we were, I have an apology to make to everyone, because we were in New York last week and we were in the park and we heard birds, and then I pulled up the Merlin app, which I love. Do you remember that? So basically you said, hold on, I'm going to mess it up. You said it's a swallow. I said it's a finch. And then the app said it's a sparrow. And I said, you were right.
I was right.
No,
I
you
was
were
right.
So, but
I
then
said it was
it
a
was
sparrow.
amazing.
I said it was a sparrow. Didn't I say it was a sparrow?
I think you said it.
A swallow.
Yeah, but it was a
I said
swallow.
swallow sparrow.
Anyway, it was hilarious how many people were like, wrong bird, wrong. So many bird. I didn't know our fabulous people that are listening to us and contributing and joining us are such avid bird watchers.
And did you see the eagle?
No.
You didn't see
I
the
didn't see
American eagle?
No.
Oh.
Did Trump sign it? Because I
Trump-
might have
he
gotten
did
in
sign-
line for
he
that.
did.
But so we were there for this film called The Last Class, which you allowed us unknowingly to make, watching you teach your last semester of the big undergraduate class. But it's such an important moment
In
to
a big undergraduate class here at Berkeley.
UC Berkeley,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That was your big undergraduate class. But it's you contending with retirement. We don't discuss. Sorry, no, we won't talk about it. And then also,
Did you use the
aging.
R word?
No, that wasn't me. And aging and your
Aging?
students. Nope.
Retirement?
And
You know,
your
this is-
students inheriting a world out of balance. But it's this candid look, and I want everyone to see it if they want to see it.
But Heather, you've done an extraordinary job, and Elliot Kirshner, the director, did an extraordinary job. I did not see it until quite recently.
You saw it 2 weeks ago.
And I saw 2 weeks ago was the first
Forced
time.
him to.
And I had the privilege a few nights ago of seeing it with my granddaughter, and there were some points in the movie where people tear up. I teared up, and she grabbed my hand. She's 16 years old, and she put her head on my shoulder,
At just the moment.
and I thought,
When you were-
okay, it doesn't get more meaningful or better than this.
I
The
love
world is falling apart. We're in a fascist state. It couldn't get worse out there. But in terms of this experience, it is beautiful.
I love that for you. So sign up at thelastclassfilm.com if you want to know. It's playing all over the country right now. Eventually, we'll be putting it online and things like that. But
I have
get
a question
it to
for
it
you.
in a theater.
But wait a minute, I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
Movies are dying.
No.
It's hard. Well, wait. Let me just finish
Oh.
the thought. There are almost no movie theaters left. I mean, Berkeley used to have, I
we
think,
had
11,
tons, yeah.
12 movie theaters. Now we're down to 1 or 2. How did you manage to get this film in so many movie theaters, since there aren't any?
Well, exactly right. So we're using a new process called theatrical on demand, which basically just means if someone wants the movie to come to their own local theater, they just have to sell enough tickets to tip it. So I could say, I'm going to get my PTA, my book group, my Indivisible group, and I just need to sell 50 tickets. And you can find out more about this at thelastclassfilm.com.
The Last Class Film, that's all one word, .com.
You're good at this game.
Well, but
I'm excited, so I'm just saying
you
it.
are
It's
very
so great.
excited. I think your excitement is very infectious.
So we had thousands of people see this film. We had 500 people in Minneapolis. We sold out in St. Louis. We were in Miami. We were in Portland. We were in Houston. All over. And people showed up and they sent us photos and they sent us videos and they said thank you. And there was one person who said it was on my bucket list to go to this theater in Denver. I had never been to the Mayan. I did that and I spoke up. I've never spoken up in front of a group of strangers before. And there were hundreds of people and I felt the urge to do so because I was motivated thinking about the profound impact education has on democracy and how intertwined they have to be.
Well, this is the theme. It's the theme of the film. It's one of my central
theme of your
themes
life.
of my life. That education and democracy are intricately and intimately connected. Why Trump is going after not just higher education, but he's also withholding funds for primary and secondary education right now. Why? Again, look at the fascist playbook. What you want to do is make sure that education and educational institutions are dysfunctional because you don't want an educated populace. You want people who are just going to follow you. Education is your enemy. This is why the Nazis burned books. This is why fascists through history, totalitarians, dictators, close universities. It's why slave owners in the 19th century in the United States didn't want their slaves to learn and prohibited them from even attending school.
And be literate.
and be illiterate because if you know how to think, if you know how to use critical judgment, you're
And
going to see,
express.
yes, you're going to see what's going on, and you're going to have to stand up.
And he's going after, I mean, it's the levels, right? So it's the administrations, it's the curricula. We've seen the book bans that have gone in many states across many levels of education, and then it's the funding.
Absolutely.
It's
And it's all connected.
Yep.
I mean, if you say, for example, that Americans should not know of Americans' history and America's history of racism and of genocide with regard to Native American people, well, then if you don't know that, how can you possibly see it when it's happening again, or it's happening around you, or it's happening in Israel and in Palestine?
I appreciate your point about there being a national reckoning and that being a potential positive. So
It's a big positive.
I feel hopeful about that. But Bob, it's July 4th weekend. How do we, celebrate?
How do we celebrate?
Celebrate? I can't even use the verb.
Well, you're raising a very troubling and good point, because part of the national reckoning, and I'm going to come back to that term again and again, has to do with what we mean by patriotism. Mm-hmm. What is the real meaning of patriotism? Patriotism is not just waving flags and sending off fireworks and standing for the national anthem. Patriotism is a matter of being willing to sacrifice for the ideals that have been handed down to us from generations that have sacrificed. What are those ideals? The ideals are the rule of law, democracy, the Bill of Rights,
civil liberties,
but also tolerance and inclusion, and yes, diversity, e pluribus unum. These are the fundamentals of patriotism, and if we are instead getting hoodwinked into worshiping a man who represents the opposite of all of these things, opposite of the rule of law, opposite of democracy, opposite of tolerance, who is really fueling bigotry and oppression and fear and cruelty, then we are not patriots. We are not acting as patriots. We have to make sure that we understand the true meaning and the true requirements of patriotism.
Okay, well, I guess I'll have a hot dog. And a Bud Light, I guess.
I want to
thinking about those things.
Well, we're at a difficult point in time.
But I'm glad to see you every week for coffee, and you.
Yeah, I am too. I want to thank you again. It was great being in Central Park.
God, that was good. Should we go on more? I think we should do more outings.
I think we should do more outings. I was just going to say that.
I was thinking we should do more outings.
Let me just say to all of you, and Heather, I want to thank you, but I also want to thank all of you. This is a rough time. We knew it was going to get very rough. The passage of this big, bad, horrible bill is a point in time that forces us to reflect on what we believe, but also who we are and who we want to be. As does a weekend called a July 4th weekend, in which we have to, I think, contemplate what patriotism really means and requires, what this country is all about. I have some friends who are leaving America. Well, I understand that. I'm not going to dump on them for doing that. But it is very important that those of us who can, who are able, stay here and fight. That is ultimately the test of patriotism. Our willingness, our ability to fight for the ideals that made this nation a nation that at least some of us, at least at some point in the not too distant past, were proud of. We'll see you next week.